Hey everybody, Tim here with today's review of James Bond, Live and Let Die. Before I get into it, this is a huge video. I'm super excited to do this one. For starters, for just this video for James Bond, this is the debut of Roger Moore. And, I mean, this is the 8th movie as far as the Eon Productions go, but this is the 10th movie for James Bond, which places it it's about 20 years since James Bond was first introduced, because this movie came out in 1973. The first book, Casino Royale, came out in 1953, and it's about 10 years since James Bond debuted in general, with the first movie, Dr. No. And if you include the two non-Eon movie productions, this is the 10th movie for James Bond, so that's big in itself. And this is my 500th video. Can you believe that? We've done Star Trek, we've done Doctor Who, we've done Golden Girls, and we've done James Bond, and this is 500 videos, starting from when I first started doing this back in January 7th. And that's huge. I'm super excited that I'm doing this with you guys. I have many more projects down the road that I'm actually filming, but I'm not producing yet. So I guess technically I've already done more than that, but it's on the down low. It's not uploaded yet, but this is the 500th video that has been uploaded. So thank you guys so much for watching these videos, watching these reviews, watching these trailer reactions. Thank you guys for everything. I'm super excited to be doing this with you guys, and I look forward to keep doing it. As long as you guys keep watching, I'll keep doing it. So, as far as this movie goes, I really liked it. I thought it was really, really good. So the obvious comparison is to compare it to Dr. No and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is Sean Connery's first movie, George Lazenby's only movie, and now we have Roger Moore's first movie. Now, people were, I feel a little shocked when this movie first came out, at least they introduced Roger Moore. I could be completely making that up. I wasn't even alive yet, so... but the reason being is when George Lazenby debuted, he was the youngest known actor, or he was the youngest actor to portray James Bond so far. He was 29 or something. And Sean Connery, when he did Dr. No, I think he was 30. So that's kind of the age range that people envision Dr. No, is right around 30, which is right around my age. So if you guys ever looking for an American James Bond. And there's my dog Lowbelly. So when this movie came out, Roger Moore was, because he's passed away, 5 years older than Sean Connery. So at this point, when this movie first came out, he was 45 years old. So he is the oldest James Bond. And I mean, with all due respect to Roger Moore and to his movies, a lot of people kind of think of him as the grandpa James Bond, especially when we get towards the end of his movies, where he is relatively old and he's kind of aged. I mean, it's part of time. It is what it is. No hate from here. And he does great. Technically speaking, looking at just the Eon Productions, Roger Moore did 7 movies, which makes him the longest running James Bond actor. If you throw in the non-Eon production movies with Never Say Never, he's tied with Sean Connery, which I feel like most people kind of put him up there. And it's kind of funny because if you look at Sean Connery and Roger Moore and the 24 current movies that are out, they make up half of them. They make up 14 of the movies. So it's kind of intimidating looking at it. So overall, I really liked this movie. I thought it was really good. I would actually say that I liked it a little bit more than Dr. No. As far as debut movies go, so far Roger Moore is above Sean Connery. It's not my favorite James Bond movie, but it is definitely pretty up there. Just from the very beginning, where we see all of these different agents killed. We don't know if they're MI6, we don't know if they're CIA, we don't know who they are, but we see the United Nations guy killed from the UN meeting in New York, the New Orleans scene, which is great, where they're doing the parade, and then he's like, who's the funeral for? And they're like, oh, it's for you. And he kills the guy, and they drop the coffin on him, and it's one of those boxes where it sucks him up. It was done really, really well. And then we go to the fictional country, San Monique, I believe it was, where we see the guy killed by a snake. And I think this is the first movie where we actually see James Bond visit a fictional country, a country that does not exist. So I thought that was kind of cool. the title song, which I've said before, I'll say it again. I love the title songs. I have a whole playlist of just title songs. In this point, it is Paul McCartney and Wings doing Live and Let Die, so I thought that was really cool. Finally, like 8 minutes in is when we finally see Bond, which is kind of a long time for some of these movies, especially like the first introduction movie. And then it's kind of a great scene where M comes in and he has this giant espresso maker, which, as someone who's serious about his coffee, like, it just kind of made me thirsty. We see Miss Moneypenny, and she mentions Q, where Q gives all of these different like gadgets and stuff, but he's not actually in it, which is the first, and I think it's the only movie since Llewellyn was introduced in the, because he was introduced in the second Bond movie, that he's not in, because he was doing like a TV show or something. So, but I liked how they actually gave him a shout out though, so that was kind of cool. And like it's a little bit of foreshadow, not done in particularly well in my opinion, but he gets a watch, and it's basically like this magnet watch, and he like steals M's spoon from his tea and stuff. And M even says like, well, they can deflect a bullet, which we never actually see that I can remember. But you can kind of tell just by watching it, like, this watch is going to be important. And sure enough, when we get to the climax of the movie, it's super important. We meet Felix again, which this is now the 5th time we've seen Felix. And it's the 5th time that it's played by a different actor. Although he will be the first returning actor after he skips a movie. So that's kind of important. Jane Seymour plays like the main Bond girl in this movie. She plays Solitaire. I love Jane Seymour. I am a huge fan of hers. Like, I'm sure most people think of her from, like, or at least I think of her from Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, because I grew up in the 90s. She had a small stint on Smallville where she played a villain. She was in Wedding Crashers. She's done all sorts of stuff. Fantastic actress. Like, I would love to meet her one day. That is on my bucket list. And like, to be completely honest with you, like I said, so I've seen her more in like later stuff. This movie came out in like 1973. I didn't even recognize her. Like, I was like, who is that? And then of course in the intro credits where it's like introducing Jane Seymour, I was like, holy shit, it's Dr. Quinn. So I thought that was kind of cool. They have mentioned before how, like, because Roger Moore was taking over for Sean Connery, they really wanted to kind of keep him a little bit different. So when he gets a drink, he orders bourbon and water instead of the martini, like, shaken, not stirred. So I thought that was kind of cool and also kind of gross, because I am personally a vodka drinker. But bourbon and water, not feeling that. I really did kind of like the scene where, like, he gets to the hotel and Mrs. Bond, like, made the hotel reservation, and he's sitting in the bath and you kind of see the snake, and then he, like, blow tortures it. So I thought that was kind of intense. I liked, again, like, they really wanted to keep him separate from Sean Connery. So throughout this whole movie, he smokes cigars rather than cigarettes, kind of like Sean Connery did, to kind of show it's a little bit of a different person. He meets his like second command, or like his CIA agent, which I thought was kind of interesting, and it was supposedly it is the first time that like James Bond has had like a relationship with an African American woman, which this whole movie is very heavy in that culture with like the voodoo in New Orleans and stuff like that. Like, when they go on the boat and stuff, I was a little surprised though, because there's flat out porn on the boat, like when she goes to go change, and you can clearly see like all the nudity in the porn and stuff, and I was like, wow, like they really got away from that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There's the double-decker bus scene, which I'm sure I'm going to shock a lot of you right now. I've never been on a double-decker bus. I mean, I'm here in America. They're not super popular. They are around and they're here. In fact, I live just on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, and there's talks of introducing double-decker buses here. But I've never actually been on one. And watching that like whole chase scene, not so much the scene where he actually goes under the bridge and it knocks the top half off, but it kind of makes me interested in being on a double-decker bus. I like where he takes over the plane and he's giving like the flying lesson And the woman's like, holy shit. Which I think is the first time they've actually said the word shit in James Bond. And it's kind of interesting to watch these movies progress throughout the years, where like it was the last movie where Bond called his the female a bitch, and then in this movie the woman says holy shit. And sure enough, when we get to a further James Bond movie that I won't spoil, and they actually say the word fuck. So it does slowly develop, where we kind of see how language changes and how things become more and more and more acceptable. I liked where Bond goes to the whole title, or he goes to a club and they sing the title song, which I think this is the first time they've ever done that, where they actually sing the title song, in this case Live and Let Die, in the movie. Like normally it's just the opening credits or it's kind of background music, but like the singer is actually singing it on the club, and I thought that was great. I really liked how they tied that in. And then, of course, the scene where they, like, sit down, or Bond sits down, and then the wall turns. It's kind of a cliche Bond scene at this point, but I still thought they did pretty well. Let's see, in Harlem, well, that was earlier, and then when he goes back to the same club, and he's like, no, I don't want to go to the wall. I'll sit somewhere in the middle. And then Felix kind of walks away, and then he sits down at the table, and then the singer who's singing the title song kind of points at him, and then he like lowers through the floor. Like I kind of felt bad for Bond, because like first he sat at the wall and it flipped, and then he sat in the middle of the room and gets sucked down, and of course they cover everything up. So earlier Bond kind of conned Solitaire into having sex with him. It turns out that she was a virgin, and losing her virginity, she can no longer read the tarot cards, which again, Jane Seymour did such a good job as Solitaire. And like she calls him the fool, but they are the lovers, and he has the stacked deck. Overall, it was great, but it kind of shows, like, I don't like how in these early movies Bond is so like, there's a difference between being like a man whore and being like a womanizer, and he just takes advantage. Like when he seduces her and he has the stacked deck, I didn't care for that. Like that kind of took me out of the movie. We realized that Mr. Big, who has kind of been the villain so far, although being who I am, whenever I hear Mr. Big, I think of Sex and the City, actually ends up being Kananga, who is the Prime Minister of Saint Monique. So there's this big connection between Harlem and this fictional country, which is super important. He like pulls off the prosthetic face, which was kind of an intense scene. It was very like Mission Impossible, where he just rips it off. The scene where they're trying to feed Bond to the alligators was a little bit much to me, and at this point in the movie, this is where it really kind of started to drag for me, which so far in most of these Bond movies, like, they're a little bit longer than they should be, which, it is the 60s, it's a very different version of filmmaking than we're used to today. And this is where it gets to that point where I start getting a little fatigued. And like the scene where he runs across the alligators, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, but not necessarily 100% necessary. The boat chase, on the other hand, I hated. I was super against the whole boat chase, the stupid sheriff, like everything about that. That was like 15 minutes of my life that was wasted. And you could have cut that whole scene out, made this movie a little bit shorter, and it would have just been that much better for it. Like, I hated that boat chase scene so much. Like I said, this movie is very steeped in like voodoo and stuff like that from New Orleans, and the scene where the guy like rises out of the grave, which that character is super amazing. I forgot to write down his name, where he's just the whole dance sequence and the top hat and everything. Like, he's such a great character, and where he rises out of the grave, I was like, that's fucking creepy. But I really liked it. I thought he did great. We see sharks in this movie, which again ends up kind of being a cliche of James Bond, most notably like Austin Powers with frickin' sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their frickin' heads, stuff like that. It ends up being a cliche, but it's pretty well done in this movie, where Mr. Big like cuts Bond's arm open to get the kind of the blood to start attracting the sharks in. The gas capsule was way too much for me. That took me out of this, like that. Where I get the gadgets, I think they're kind of funny with like the whole watch and everything, especially where he uses the watch to get the gas capsule, and then he uses the watch again to like saw through the rope. I was like, okay, fine, you're James Bond, whatever. The gas capsule though, like where he shoots the couch and the couch starts to blow up, I was like, I mean, that's kind of funny because we see Whisper fly all over the place. But when he shoots Dr. Kananga, and he like starts to blow up as a person, and he looks like the ant from Harry Potter, and he flies up and explodes, I was like, no, you completely lost me. Again, completely unnecessary. I didn't like it. There's the obligated scene where Bond and Solitaire are getting on the train, and Felix is like, what are you going to do on a train for 16 hours? Wonder what Bond is going to do for 16 hours. Probably nonstop. And of course, again, kind of obligated, a little cliche at this point, the henchman, which is the guy with the claw at this point, ends up showing up on the train, has a big fight scene with Bond. He throws him out of the train, and that's the end of the movie. Overall, like, I thought this was a really interesting movie. I really did enjoy it. Compared to Dr. No, I liked it a little bit more just because it was more steeped in a different culture, stuff like that. Whereas Dr. No was kind of slow if you guys watched that review. But there was a lot that could have been cut out of this movie. So for those who have seen this one, what did you think about Roger Moore's debut movie? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you guys for, I don't know if any of you have watched all 500 of my videos, but thank you guys for watching all of these and sticking with me through it. I'm having so much fun, and I really appreciate all of those who have subscribed, given me a thumbs up, everything like that. It really means a lot to me. And I will see you guys next time for The Man with the Golden Gun.